Howdy and pie. Semester's over, pretty much. Just for reference for the future, this is a little retrospective I'm doing for English 3880 here at GGC. Spring 2023. My name is Alec Burns. I'm a digital media major here at GGC, and after this upcoming semester, I will be in the senior year of my program. I will say, apologies if you hear any static or wind or anything. We're dealing with 20-mile-per-hour winds right now, and I think some of that is picking up on microphones, so just sorry ahead of time. So I guess, just to start off the retrospective, we should address the fact the majority of the class was spent working with multimodal projects. Obviously, if you're taking the course right now, then you know that's effectively any project that uses more than one mode of communication: sound, sight, visual, etc., etc. And that had a lot of really interesting interactions with how the modules went, and a lot of sort of caveats that came through with certain projects that I didn't personally run into, but I think that some people might if they're not prepared for it. Just to start off, I'm going to go ahead and go module by module to sort of address them and what we learned with them to a degree, and also like how they worked for me. So to start off with module 1, to kind of introduce us to how multimodal projects work, Dr. Paparoth had us look at some former projects of his, and specifically former educational projects that I think worked pretty well. This really hammered into me from day one just how open-ended some of these projects were going to be, because while they were very almost PowerPoint-like in their execution, and they weren't that interactive for most of it, for both, there was a huge encouragement to take time to reflect on it. Specifically, with the music half of the assignment, you were asked to listen to an album, to sit, to reflect on it in specific ways. That really hit home with me because I'm not normally the type to do those types of practices. And then with the how to tell a story module, we ended up effectively reflecting on both just stories that we had to tell, and for a lot of people just really impactful like albums and music for them, which to me, that kind of hit home a lot of the more creative aspects of most of these projects for me, and that really set me at a good baseline. I'm going to skim over a couple of the next projects because they're not non-impactful, but they built off of this previous concept. Module 2 was effectively us making our own multimodal project, and this was incredibly open-ended, and in fact didn't even need to be what I ended up making mine, which was a little video essay. I did learn the necessity of not talking too much, as I did a lot of talking for that, effectively telling a D&D story that I had. I'm still proud of the work that went into it, of course, but it ended up dragging out, and a lot of the positive feedback that I got really, really helped kind of keep me focused for future projects. Module 3 was more of an interesting thing for me as an IT student, because we looked at ChatGPT and chatbots as a whole. I got introduced to it, and I will say I have used ChatGPT since, both for inspiration for things like D&D and also just even helping with programming. And yeah, it's a terrifying amount of power that it has, and it was a very interesting introduction, I will say, at minimum. Module 4 was probably the one I had some of the hardest time with. I'm not very good at writing long-form analysis, and so I had a bit of trouble with that rhetorical analysis aspect. But the articles in question that we were given to read were really interesting, and I really liked. This is an aspect I hadn't considered when I was kind of tearing my hair out writing them, was I realized there was a lot of interesting takes that people had about these papers effectively, and that really, I think, added to the value of the module as a whole. Module 5, this was a really fun one for me. I basically hyper-focused on the rhetorical analysis angle from the previous week and decided to make a little tiny video essay on a video called Please Don't Buy Atomic Heart, and a lot of how focusing on even just your introduction can be very important, and how things like, say, straw man arguments can end up tearing away audiences, where a big focus for me was the sort of negative reception that video had and why I thought it may have had that. Next up, this was probably the most impactful of the projects for me, which I'll get to with Module 9 specifically. But Module 6 was us creating a project draft for a project that we were intending to make for Module 9, something that we would work on bit by bit and divide properly. It was, as an actual turn in itself, Module 6 is not that difficult, but it sets effectively a contract of this is what I'm going to do with X. And I'll talk about this a little bit more with Module 9, but obviously the project didn't quite turn out for me. Module 7, this is one of those cases where I ran into an ambition problem. So I knew what I wanted to make. I wanted to make, using JavaScript, which is a language I've been using frequently this semester for other classes, I wanted to make an interactive, sort of like text-based RPG story with branching paths and choices. Like, I had that image down in my head. And the problem with an ambition like that, and it's something that it's very fun to learn about stuff like game design, is there is a reason why, like let's take like a story game like Life is Strange, or pretty much every single Telltale game in existence. There's a reason they always fail to deliver on their promise of having all of these different branching paths by the end. And that's because to account for all of those choices is an absurd amount of work. So the issue I ran into is knowing that I just wanted to do a little bit of work with JavaScript, I knew what animations I was going to do. I was just like, you know what, Friday I'm going to draft out my script because I've got some other stuff that I've got to do, but I'm going to draft it out, and Saturday I'm going to knock the whole thing out. And about 6 hours of writing into Saturday, I was meditating, I was home alone, full focus on the writing assignment. I realized I was going to have to scale back so badly. So the project in question, while I'm still proud of it, I took a concept that I really like, which is time loop nihilism. I really like that storytelling aspect, so I took it and I ran with it. But it was nowhere near what I intended. Like, this was... if I was graded based off of my initial intention versus what I actually put out, it would have been catastrophic. Like, barely a comparison. And for reference, the actual finished project, I realized I could have made this way more efficient. Fully turned into a 500 lines of code assignment, because I fully did not take the steps necessary to build this from the ground up. Let that be a good note. If you're going to make something that grand, you need to put the footwork in ahead of time. Period. End of story. Module 8 was the one I was not necessarily a huge fan of. So for reference, this was the module where we were effectively creating a poster for the English program here. And I think I'm biased here, and I will put this up front. It's not my forte. This type of design work is not something I'm very good at. And I was swamped. I'm part of TAP, the Technology Ambassadors program here at GGC this semester. And working on projects adjacent to this, I got a grade for it, don't get me wrong. I'm not unproud of what I put out, but I was not able to do nearly as much as I wanted to with this assignment. And honestly, I don't think it fit that well into how the class sort of, delved itself. I think if I had more design skills, I would probably see this as a much better module, because it would be more of a break at that point. And I think that that's where the value would definitely come in. My bias needs to be understood for that. But other than that, it was not a very stressful assignment, and that was definitely very useful for me at the time that I had this assignment. Okay, Module 9. Bit of a description here. So this was meant to be a portfolio website for me, because I am looking to make a career in web development. So I need to show off both design skills and JavaScript skills and all this stuff that I need to do for web programming. And like Module 7, I got ambitious and did not frame it out as much as I needed to. While I'd whittled away at it, I fully believed that the animations I wanted to do would be completely possible in a short amount of time. And it turns out that's not at all the case. There are limitations with web formatting that I spent a full 6 hours or so trying to fix problems that it turned out were not fixable. Like, the limitations of the scene made it to where the only way around it was to effectively completely upend and create a very, very complicated fix that wouldn't work for other situations. And by the time I realized that, I'd wasted all of that time, and it was like midnight on Sunday, and I realized I was fully not going to be able to make the deadline. I do take responsibility for that. I should have worked on it more, and I should have done more research on it ahead of time, because that would have given me the time to actually implement those fixes. And finally, honestly, we're here at Module 10. This is sort of the regret phase for me, where I do get to look back at the stuff that I wish I'd done a little differently. That being said, if I had to give a summary for the class, like whether or not it was valuable, I'd definitely say I would happily take it again. I'd happily recommend it to people. I'd happily recommend Dr. Paproth. The open-ended nature of this class does so much from a creative perspective for me that I cannot compare it to any other that I've had. And legitimately, I had fun with these projects, which is not something I've been able to say for a while. So ultimately, if you're a student looking to take this course, or taking this course right now and you're early in, please don't be me and delay all of your assignments until last minute, because it will catch up with you. You know it's going to catch up with you. You're in college. But also, don't be the person to undersell yourself. Don't do the bare minimum. If you're going to make a project, I do truly believe that you should put your best foot forward every time, if you can. Obviously there are reasons why you might not be able to, but, do your best, do what you can, and ultimately, have fun with it. I think it is a very valuable class specifically for that.